For 6 years, my husband told me we couldn't afford new tires. 6 years. Every time I brought it up, Anthony had the same answer. Not right now, Marissa. Things are tight. So I learned to drive carefully. I learned to avoid standing water. I learned to slow down whenever it rained. I learned to ignore the faint vibration in the steering wheel, and the way the tires seemed to lose pressure faster than they should. I learned to tell myself that this was what marriage looked like when two people were building something together. What I didn't know was that while I was driving our children around on tires that should have been replaced months earlier, my husband had millions of dollars sitting in accounts I didn't even know existed. And the night I discovered exactly how much money he had, I also discovered something far more painful. The money wasn't the only thing he'd been hiding. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a calculator, a stack of overdue notices, and a cup of coffee that had gone cold almost an hour earlier. The mortgage was 3 months behind. The power company had already sent a final warning. Our daughter's school had emailed me about an unpaid activity fee. And sitting beside all of that was a handwritten list I'd made that morning. Mortgage, electric, groceries, car insurance, tires. I had circled the word tires twice. The front passenger tire had developed a small bulge near the sidewall, and every time I looked at it, I imagined the children sitting in the back seat. I had asked Anthony about replacing all 4 tires 2 weeks earlier. He'd barely looked up from his phone. Maybe next month. Anthony, that tire isn't safe. I said, next month. You've been saying next month for almost a year. He had sighed then, the way he always did when I asked questions he didn't want to answer. Marissa, we're trying to keep the business alive. You know that. I did know. At least I thought I did. So I had driven home that evening and crossed tires off the list. That was the kind of wife I'd become. I crossed things off. Vacations, new clothes, restaurants, my nursing degree, tires. Anything that wasn't absolutely necessary could wait. And then, that night, something landed on my kitchen counter that changed everything. It was buried beneath grocery store flyers and junk mail. A thick white envelope. Anthony's name was printed across the front. I almost threw it away. Then I noticed the return address. It wasn't a bank I recognized. I opened it, and for several seconds, I couldn't understand what I was looking at. At the top of the statement was Anthony Bell's name. Beneath it was an account number, and beneath that was the balance. $2,800,000, $417.63. I stared at the number, then I blinked, then I looked again. $2,800,000. I read it a third time because my brain refused to connect the number on the page with the man sleeping upstairs. Anthony Bell, my husband, the man who had told me we couldn't afford 4 tires. The man who had told me the mortgage payment had to wait because a client hadn't paid him. The man who had watched me stand at the grocery store, calculating whether I could afford name-brand cereal. The man who had told me to cancel my daughter's dance lessons because we needed to be responsible. $2,800,000. In his name, not our name, his. I lowered myself into the kitchen chair. The house was completely quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. And somewhere upstairs, my husband was sleeping peacefully. I looked down at the statement again. Then I noticed something else. There were recent transactions, large ones, payments, transfers, investment accounts, and one address that I recognized. I had seen that address before. I just hadn't understood what it meant. That was the moment I realized the money wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the first piece of the story I had finally been allowed to see. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear where in the world you're listening to Marissa's story from. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Because 6 years earlier, I didn't think I had married a liar. I thought I had married the man I was going to grow old with. And that belief would cost me almost everything. My name is Marissa Bell. I was 26 when I met Anthony. We met at a church fundraiser in St. Louis. It wasn't romantic. There were folding tables everywhere, paper plates stacked beside aluminum trays of food, children running between adults, and someone's aunt had made enough macaroni and cheese to feed half the neighborhood. Anthony was working the drink table. I remember him because he made everybody laugh. When I walked over, he smiled and handed me a cup of sweet tea. "You look like you need this." I laughed. "Do I? You've got that look." "What look?" "Like you've been answering everybody else's problems all day." He was right. I had always been that person. The responsible one. The person people called when they needed help. At the time, I was 2 semesters away from finishing nursing school. I had plans. Real plans. I wanted to work in a hospital. I wanted to wear scrubs and carry my own badge. I wanted to help people. Anthony told me he was building a logistics company. It was small. He admitted that, but he talked about it like it was already something enormous. I just need time, he told me, and capital. He said once the company got through the difficult beginning, everything would change. I believed him. I believed the certainty in his voice. I believed the way he talked about the future. And more than anything, I believed that we were going to build that future together. 18 months later, we were married. Our wedding was small. My mother arranged most of it. The flowers came from a grocery store. We didn't have a fancy reception, and I didn't care, because I thought I had found something more valuable than money. I had found a partner, or so I thought. A few months after our wedding, Anthony's company needed money. He told me the bank wouldn't approve the loan unless I signed with him. "We're partners," he said. I signed. I didn't ask enough questions. I trusted him. Then, shortly afterward, he told me something that changed the direction of my life. "We need you to work full-time for a while." I was still in nursing school. 1 semester, I reminded him. "I know. I'll be finished soon." "I know." He took my hands. "Marissa, I need you right now." That sentence stayed with me. I need you. So I withdrew from school. 1 semester before graduation. I told myself it was temporary. 6 months, maybe a year. Then I'd go back. I took a job at a medical billing office. Anthony promised me that once his company stabilized, I'd finish my degree. I believed him. That became the pattern of our marriage. He promised. I sacrificed. He promised again. I sacrificed again. And because I loved him, every sacrifice felt like proof that we were a team. We weren't starving. That's what made the lie so difficult to recognize. We had a house. We had 2 children. We had cars. We had food. But everything always felt tight. There was never enough for anything extra. Anthony said the company was growing, but growth was expensive. He said every dollar had to go back into the business, so we ate at home. We skipped vacations. We drove our cars long after other people would have replaced them. And every time something broke, Anthony said the same thing. "We'll fix it when things loosen up." The bathroom ceiling leaked. "We'll fix it." The washing machine made a terrible grinding noise. "We'll replace it later." My car needed new tires. "We'll get them next month." Next month became next season. Next season became next year. And eventually I stopped asking. Then came the tire I mentioned earlier. The bulge. I showed it to Anthony. He looked at it. "It's fine, Anthony. It's not fine. It's temporary. Temporary doesn't make it safe." He stared at me. "Marissa, we're behind on the mortgage." That shut me up. Because I knew he was right about one thing. We were behind. So I drove slower. I became careful, and I convinced myself that this was what sacrifice looked like. I didn't know that while I was worrying about a tire, Anthony was moving money into accounts I didn't know existed. The first strange thing was the second phone. It appeared about 4 years into our marriage. It was black, thin, expensive looking. I found it in his gym bag. "What's this?" "Work phone." "You already have a work phone." "That's my regular phone." "So this is another work phone?" "Yeah." He took it from my hand. "Different clients." That explanation was enough for me. At least then it was. Then there were the late nights, the cologne, the unexplained trips, the way Anthony began keeping his phone face down. There was also a Sunday afternoon, when my neighbor Pam said something that stayed with me. "I think I saw Anthony's car across town." "Where?" She described a gated community. I laughed. "You've got the wrong car." "Maybe." She shrugged. But I remember looking at Anthony's car that night. Gray sedan. Nothing special. Exactly like dozens of other cars. So I let it go. That's what I did with everything. I let it go. Because once you start questioning one thing, you have to question everything. And I wasn't ready for that. The next warning came from Anthony's mother. Her name was Odessa. She was warm, funny, and sometimes incapable of keeping a secret. It happened at Thanksgiving. We were sitting around the table when she had a little too much wine. She looked at Anthony and smiled. "You're doing a good job taking care of everybody." Anthony smiled. Then she added, "Both households." The table went quiet. I laughed because I thought I'd misunderstood. "Both households?" "Ote." She waved her hand. "You know what I mean." Anthony immediately interrupted. "She means the business." I looked at him. "What business?" "The storage facility." I accepted it. I wish I hadn't. But hindsight is cruel, because it makes every warning look obvious. At the time, I wasn't looking for evidence. I was looking for reasons to stay. By our 5th year of marriage, our finances weren't improving. They were getting worse. Anthony still talked about the next contract, the next investor, the next payment, the next big opportunity. But there was always another reason we couldn't breathe financially. Then the power company sent a shut-off notice. I called him. "Anthony, we're 3 months behind. I'll handle it." "When?" "Friday." "Are you sure?" "Marissa, yes." He sounded annoyed. I apologized. I actually apologized for asking my husband when our electricity would be paid. That night, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by bills, and something inside me changed. I wasn't angry. I was tired. Tired of being told not to worry. Tired of being treated like the details of my own life were none of my business. So I opened our banking app. I started looking, and that's when I saw the storage payment. Every month, same amount, same facility, 40 miles away. I stared at it. Why would Anthony need storage 40 miles away? His office was 15 minutes from our house. The next morning, I searched the address. It was a large storage facility. I didn't tell him. A few days later, I found a key. Small brass key. White tag. No label. I held it in my palm for almost a minute. Then I put it back. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Then the P.O. box appeared. A renewal notice. Anthony's name. Different address. Different part of town. My hands went cold. A storage unit. A second phone. A P.O. box. A gated neighborhood. And suddenly, the 6 years I'd spent explaining everything away began to feel like 6 years of being deliberately kept in the dark. 3 days later, the bank statement arrived. The $2.8 million. I didn't confront Anthony immediately. I could have. But something stopped me. I needed to know what I was dealing with. So I photographed the statement. I wrote down every address, every account number, every transaction I could see. And then I found the address from the statement. It was connected to a property in the same gated community Pam had mentioned. My heart began beating faster. I knew what I had to do. I had to follow him. 3 days later, I followed Anthony from work. I called my sister. "Can you watch the kids tonight?" She heard something in my voice. "What's wrong?" "I'll tell you later." I parked 2 houses away from his office. At 5:42 p.m., Anthony walked out. He got into his car, and instead of coming home, he drove east. I followed him, past the interstate, past the neighborhoods I knew, into an area where the houses became larger and the streets became quieter. Then he turned into the gated community. My hands started shaking. He stopped in front of a large brick house. A gate opened. He drove inside. I parked across the street. And then I saw her. The front door opened before Anthony even reached it. A woman stood there. She looked to be in her early 30s. She had a baby on her hip. And when Anthony reached the porch, she smiled. Then she kissed him. Not like a girlfriend. Not like someone having an affair. Like a wife welcoming her husband home. Anthony put his hand on the baby's back. The little girl reached for him, and he picked her up. I sat there behind the steering wheel. I couldn't move, because suddenly I understood. There wasn't another woman. There was another family. I waited until the children were asleep. Then I put the bank statement on the kitchen table. Beside it, I placed the address. Anthony walked into the room. He looked at the papers, then at me. His face changed. "Marissa, how much money do you have?" He didn't answer. "How much?" "It's complicated." "No," I pointed at the statement. "That's not complicated." He sat down. I could see him thinking, calculating, trying to decide which lie would survive. "It's business money. $2.8 million? Not all of it is liquid." I stared at him. "You told me we couldn't afford tires." He looked away. "You told me we couldn't pay the mortgage. Marissa, you let me withdraw from nursing school." His face tightened. "Don't do this. You let me believe we were broke. We weren't broke. The words came out quietly. That was the moment something inside me died. We weren't broke? No. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was disbelief. You watched me clip coupons. He said nothing. You watched me worry about the electricity. Nothing. You watched me drive our children around with unsafe tires. I was going to replace them. When? He couldn't answer. Then I asked the question I had been afraid to ask. Who is the woman? Silence. What's her name? Renee. And the baby? He closed his eyes. My daughter. I sat back. Your daughter. Yes. How long? He didn't answer immediately. Almost 3 years. 3 years. He had another family for 3 years. While I was sitting beside him every night. While our children slept upstairs. While I believed we were struggling together. I looked at the man across from me and realized I didn't recognize him anymore. Renee wasn't just an affair. Anthony had built a second life. He had bought a house. He had opened accounts. He had created a version of himself that was single, successful, and financially secure. He told Renee that he had been divorced before meeting her. He told her his first marriage had ended years earlier. He told her the money was his. He told her everything except the truth. And that was when I understood something. Anthony hadn't simply been lying to me. Lying was how he lived. I left that night. I took the children to my sister's house. 3 garbage bags, a folder of financial documents, a laptop, the clothes on our backs. That was it. 6 years of marriage fit into the trunk of my car. My sister's friend Carla was an attorney. She specialized in family and business matters. 3 days after I left, I sat across from her in a small office. She read everything. The bank statement, the loan documents, the business paperwork, the P.O. box notice, the storage records. Then she looked at me. Marissa, I need you to understand something. What? This may be much bigger than infidelity. I felt my stomach drop. She explained that the original business loan I had co-signed could give me an important financial connection to the company. But she also warned me not to assume that meant I automatically owned half of everything. We're going to have to establish exactly what your legal interest is, she said. What about the $2.8 million? We need to find out where it came from. And the house? Same thing. I nodded. For the first time, someone wasn't telling me to trust Anthony. Someone was telling me to find the documents. So that's what we did. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was Renee. I know you probably hate me. I didn't say anything. I didn't know. I believed her. She sounded terrified. I swear I didn't know about you. We agreed to meet. When I saw her sitting across from me at the coffee shop, I expected to feel anger. Instead, I felt something else. Recognition. She looked like a woman whose world had just collapsed. She had believed Anthony too. He had told her he was divorced. He had told her the house was his. He had told her the money was legitimate. She had a daughter. I had 2 children. And both of us had trusted the same man. Renee reached into her purse. I found this. She placed a receipt on the table. A hotel. A date. And another name. Curtis. I recognized it. Anthony had mentioned Curtis before. He was supposedly a business associate. A silent investor. A man who didn't like attention. But when Renee told me Curtis had been calling Anthony repeatedly about the transfer, I knew I had to show Carla. I took a picture of the receipt, and the next morning, I was back in Carla's office. Carla spent weeks examining company records. Then she found something. The logistics company had grown far beyond what Anthony had ever admitted. There were contracts, investments, properties, corporate transfers, and payments that didn't make sense. Curtis had been using several businesses to move money through legitimate-looking transactions. Anthony's company had become one of the businesses involved. The $2.8 million wasn't simply Anthony's secret savings. Some of the money had come from legitimate company profits. Some had been moved through questionable transactions, and some of it was connected to accounts Curtis controlled. Anthony had crossed a line years earlier. At first, according to the records, he probably didn't know the full extent of what Curtis was doing, but eventually he did. And instead of walking away, he kept accepting the money. That was the part I struggled with most, because it meant there had been a point where Anthony knew enough to stop, and he didn't. Carla advised me to cooperate fully. I handed over everything: bank statements, emails, loan documents, business paperwork, anything I had. I told investigators the truth. I didn't know about the money. I didn't know about Renee. I didn't know what Curtis was doing, and I didn't know what Anthony had been involved in. The investigators asked me questions for hours. What did Anthony tell me about the company? When did I leave nursing school? Did I ever see financial documents? Did I know about the second phone? Did I know about the P.O. box? Did I know about the property? Every answer seemed to expose another piece of the life I hadn't known I was living. But eventually, one investigator said something I never forgot. "You're not responsible for what someone hid from you." I cried after he left, because I had spent weeks wondering whether somehow this was my fault. It wasn't. 6 weeks later, Anthony was arrested. Federal agents searched the company. They searched the house. They seized computers and financial records. Curtis was arrested too. Renee called me afterward. She was crying. "I don't know what I'm going to do." Neither did I. But something had changed. The secrets weren't ours anymore. They belonged to the people who had created them. The months afterward weren't glamorous. There was no instant victory, no magical moment when everything became perfect. There were court dates, lawyer meetings, bills, school pickups, therapy, questions from the children, and nights when I sat on my sister's couch wondering how my life had become this. My daughter kept asking when Daddy was coming home. My son stopped talking about him. I had to learn how to answer questions without turning my children's father into a monster in their eyes. That was harder than I expected. I was angry, but they were children. They didn't need my anger. They needed their mother, so I became their mother. Every morning, every night, even on the days when I barely recognized myself. One afternoon, almost a year after I left Anthony, I drove past a tire shop. I stopped. For a moment, I just sat there. Then I pulled in. The mechanic checked the car. "You definitely need new tires." I almost laughed. "How much?" He gave me the price. I paid. No discussion. No waiting until next month. No asking Anthony. No wondering whether the business could afford it. I watched the old tires being removed, and I realized I was crying. Not because of the money. Because of what those tires represented. For 6 years I had been asking permission to take care of myself. That day, I stopped. Carla helped me secure a portion of the legitimate assets I had a legal claim to. Not the $2.8 million. Not the money tied to questionable transactions. I didn't want any of that. What mattered was that the sacrifices I had made and the contributions I had made to the early business were finally recognized. I paid down the mortgage. I found a modest home for the children, and then I did something I hadn't allowed myself to do in 6 years. I went back to nursing school. I was 31. Some of the other students were younger than me. I didn't care. I sat in that classroom with a notebook in front of me and tears in my eyes, because 6 years earlier, I had walked away from this dream for Anthony. Now I was walking back toward it for myself. Renee and I stayed in touch. People found that strange. Sometimes I found it strange too, but we understood something no one else could. We had both been lied to. She hadn't stolen my husband. Anthony had deceived both of us. Her daughter and my children eventually met. They played together without knowing the complicated story that had brought their mothers into the same room. Sometimes Renee and I would sit nearby and watch them laugh, and I'd think about the woman I had been that night in the car outside her house. Broken, terrified, convinced my life was over. She couldn't have imagined this. Neither could I. Months after his sentencing, I received a letter from Anthony. I didn't open it immediately. It sat on my kitchen table for 2 days. When I finally read it, it wasn't what I expected. He didn't ask me to take him back. He didn't ask for money. He didn't even ask for forgiveness. He wrote about the children. He wrote that prison had given him time to think. He wrote that he finally understood what he had destroyed. I read the letter once, then I folded it. I put it in a drawer, and I moved on. Because forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. I could eventually forgive someone without giving them access to my life again. That was a lesson I had to learn. The following spring, I walked across a stage wearing a cap and gown. My sister was standing. My son was shouting. My daughter was holding a handmade sign. And when I received my nursing degree, I looked toward them and started crying. Not because I had finally gotten revenge on Anthony. I hadn't. That wasn't what this was. I was crying because the 26-year-old woman who had walked away from nursing school had finally come back. She had waited 6 years, but she was still there. I thought about that kitchen table, the overdue notices, the cold coffee, the calculator, the bank statement, the $2.8 million, and the tires, especially the tires. Anthony had thought the thing that would break me was money. He was wrong. Money was just the thing that finally showed me the truth. The real loss had been 6 years of believing I needed someone else's permission to pursue my own life. And the real victory wasn't getting anything from Anthony. It was getting myself back. My children are older now. They ask harder questions. Sometimes they ask about their father. I answer honestly, but carefully. They deserve the truth. They also deserve childhood. My son once asked me something that stopped me completely. "Mom, do you wish you never married Dad?" I thought about it. Then I told him no. "I don't regret you." He smiled. I continued. "But I do regret how long I ignored myself." That was the truth. I had spent years believing loyalty meant staying quiet. I thought being a good wife meant accepting sacrifice without asking questions. I thought trusting someone meant never looking too closely. I was wrong. Trust isn't the absence of questions. Trust is what survives when questions are answered honestly. Anthony couldn't give me that. So eventually, I gave it to myself. I still have that bank statement. It's folded inside a box in my closet. Sometimes I take it out. Not because I miss that life. I don't. I keep it because it reminds me of something. That ordinary piece of paper almost went into the trash. I almost never opened it. If I hadn't, I might have spent another year believing the same story. Another year driving those tires. Another year putting my dreams on hold. Another year believing that the man beside me was struggling for the same future I was struggling for. But I opened the envelope. And everything changed. Not because the statement made me rich. It didn't. It made me awake. That's different. The night I discovered my husband's $2.8 million, I thought I had discovered how much money he had hidden from me. I eventually realized I had discovered something much more important. How much of my own life I had been hiding from myself. I had hidden my ambitions, my instincts, my voice, my questions, my ability to say no. I had convinced myself that being patient was always virtuous. Sometimes patience is wisdom, sometimes it's fear. And sometimes, you stay quiet so long that silence begins to feel like loyalty. It isn't. Today, I have my nursing career. I have my children. I have a home that feels peaceful. I have friends who know the real me. And when something doesn't feel right, I don't immediately tell myself I'm imagining it. I listen. Because that quiet voice inside me wasn't trying to destroy my marriage. It was trying to protect me. And maybe that's the part of this story I wish I had understood 6 years earlier. Sometimes the thing that breaks your heart is the very thing that breaks open the door to the life you were supposed to live. So if you're sitting somewhere right now ignoring something that doesn't make sense because you're afraid of what the answer might be, I won't tell you what to do. But I will tell you this. Don't abandon yourself just to preserve someone else's version of your life. I spent 6 years doing that. And I almost lost 6 more. The bank statement changed my life. But the decision to believe what I saw changed it forever. If you were sitting at my kitchen table that night, with overdue bills in front of you, and a bank statement showing $2.8 million in your husband's name, what would you have done? Would you have confronted him immediately? Would you have investigated quietly? And if you discovered that he had another family, would you have wanted to hear his explanation? Tell me what you would have done in the comments. And if Marissa's story stayed with you, subscribe for more stories of betrayal, hidden secrets, family, resilience, and the unexpected moments that change everything. Because sometimes the truth doesn't arrive with a warning. Sometimes it arrives in an envelope you almost throw away. And sometimes, opening that envelope is the first step toward getting your life back.